Okay, so I want to start off my final video log by saying that I really enjoyed this project, mostly because I am not one to step outside of my comfort zone. It's really, really difficult for me. It always has been. So doing these three activities was really, really eye-opening for me, and like, I'm not just saying that, it really was, and I learned a lot about myself and obviously a lot about others, especially people in different cultures than mine. Start out by things that I learned about other people through my experiences. One of the first things that I learned through all three of my experiences is that my culture and other people's cultures, all the cultures together, are more the same than different. And originally, before I had done this project, I was thinking, we're so different. We don't speak, we might not speak the same languages, we might not look the same, we might not wear the same things, but when you get past all the appearances and all of that kind of stuff, and you get down deep to, who people really are, you see that you have so many similarities in, like, maybe food or music or just common interests, sports, like other things like that. And I've just discovered that we have more the same than different. And the experience where I really realized that was when I was talking to Tabitha, the girl on my floor when we went to dinner. And yeah, so she really opened my eyes to the fact that, our cultures were very, very similar. Might be different with traditions and stuff like that, but we are very, very similar, and that was really eye-opening for me. The second thing that I learned through this whole experience was that everyone has different passions through their culture. And I learned this mostly when I went to the Cutting Edge meeting, the religious group meeting. And although it is the same religion as me, and I do believe in the same things, I've just learned mostly that people can be more or less passionate about something in the same culture that you are. And I learned this because I was talking to a girl, and at first, like I said in my video log for the Cutting Edge video log, I was really, really apprehensive about going, and I was really nervous because I wasn't as passionate about Christ and the Lord the way that these people were in the Cutting Edge group. And but that's not a bad thing. I mean, everyone can be passionate about different things, and I'm just not passionate about the same things as some other people, but that doesn't mean, that their culture is more or less than mine. So that was another thing that I learned about other people. One thing that I learned about myself through this whole experience is that I'm able to be open about learning about differences in people's lives. So I don't know if I was closed off to this at first. I don't think I was completely. I mean, I'm open to different cultures and learning about them, but through these experiences, I've been able to learn that I can be, open to learning more in depth about them. I learned this through again, talking with Tabitha and learning really kind of in depth about her culture and her traditions, and so that was really, really a great learning experience for me, and it made me realize that I can be even more open to learning about differences and traditions and things like that. The second thing that I learned about myself was that whenever I from now on go into a situation where I'm awkward and am being pushed outside of my comfort zone, is that being honest is probably the number one most important thing. When I went to the Cutting Edge group and I was putting on a facade for the first like half hour or hour I was there, I was so not being myself, and I was trying to fake it, and it was just a bad attempt, and people called me out on it, and they were like, hey, it's okay, you can totally relax, we know that not everyone's in the same place here. And so being honest is probably the number one thing that I learned about myself when going into situations that you're not used to and not comfortable with. So some conclusions that I've pulled from these experiences for my future teaching is that I need to make sure that when I am teaching a global classroom, when I am teaching a very multicultural classroom, that I need to learn about my students. And that means where they come from, what languages they speak, their traditions, their their culture, like just learn everything about it. And I know that that might sound like a lot, and that sounds like a lot to me too, but getting to know my students I think will be number one for me, because when you know your students and you know their culture, you can expect, you cannot over expect. Like if someone is doing something different than I would have done it, and maybe some kids are like pointing it out, like, oh my gosh, why is she wearing that, why are they doing that, I can explain, this is a part of who they are, this is what they've known, this is how they've been grown up, because it is their culture. And so I think learning and getting to know my students and their cultural backgrounds is going to be so important for when I'm teaching in a multicultural and global classroom. The second thing that I can now conclude for when I'm teaching in my global or multicultural classroom is to just not make assumptions. I learned this again through speaking with Tabitha, and I know that I was making a ton of assumptions when we went to dinner, or but even before we went to dinner, and I was just like, oh, I don't know if I'm gonna know what she's talking about, or I was really nervous. And after dinner, I was like, literally saying to myself, like, you are so silly, like why are you making all those silly assumptions? And I guess we're kind of, growing up in a different culture, you kind of are trained to make those assumptions and think those stereotypes. But now that I know to not make assumptions, because we are going to be probably more similar than different, we're all, me and Tabitha, both college students, both go to MSU. I mean, we have so many similarities. And so I think that not making assumptions, especially for when I'm teaching, if I have a kid who, is maybe doing something weird when he's eating at lunch, or maybe coloring something like differently, I shouldn't just assume that he doesn't know how to do it, or he or she doesn't know how to do it, or he or she can't do it. I should just like get to know the student, and then I will be able to understand why he or she is doing that. And so I think not making assumptions is one of the most important things that I learned throughout this whole experience. So really love this whole project. This was a great thing to push me out of my comfort zone, and I learned so much from it. And